Good morning and welcome back to Compound Conversations. I'm Jesse Flores.
And I'm Julie Mann.
And today we are going to talk about constraints. Julie, this is something that you and I, we always say people want to rush to deploying, rush to building, like that's what their goal is, right? And very often we find that people aren't as thoughtful as they should be about the problem that they're trying to solve in the first place. And as a result, you rush to the end of the line and you realize, oh, actually, that wasn't even the real problem that we should have been solving.
Right.
In our system, we call that a constraint. We say signal is the first thing. And with signal, we're trying to find the constraint and the problem that we want to solve first. Talk to me a little bit about constraint. What is it? Why does it matter? Where have we seen it? And why do people miss it so often?
Yeah, well, I'm going to go a teeny bit backwards, but I promise I'll go forwards. But I was in a meeting the other day. And so as we're talking, all of a sudden somebody brings out the list, right? And so all of a sudden I just had this like compound moment, right? Because I was like, okay, here we go. Because every leadership team I have ever worked with has the list. Mm-hmm. And it's the problems list, it's the issues list. And so, the list comes out and it doesn't matter what it is called in your organization, it exists everywhere, right? And so it's very common. So anyway, so then they started kind of planning by urgency and they were like, we need to renumber these. And, I'm listening for a little, I'm listening in. Okay, gotcha. But the list is generating those action items, mm-hmm. right? But it's never talking about what the list contains, i.e. the constraint, right? The list is your actions.
Yep.
But as I listened to the items on the list, none of them were a constraint. And so, when we're trying to solve symptoms versus constraints, the list is perpetual, right? Because we never got to that constraint.
So clarify this distinction. So I think about this. So we run on EOS, as we've mentioned before. In EOS, we talk about the issues list. And in your L10 meetings, you're supposed to do what's called IDS. You identify the issue, you discuss it ostensibly until you find the root cause of the issue, and then you solve it. And in the world of EOS, solving typically means it's delegated to somebody to take the next step. At least that's how we interpret it. Right. At some level, what I'm hearing you say is that the issue isn't the constraint, but maybe the constraint is what you find at the bottom of the D in IDS, mm-hmm. at the bottom of discuss. But my experience, and I'll throw myself under the bus here, is it actually took us quite a while to get good at identifying the constraint. We would talk around an issue a lot,
right?
But I don't know that we would talk down through the root of the issue mm-hmm. as much as we should have. Why does that happen? Why do we just continually go around in circles?
Because it's not uncomfortable. I mean, getting to the bottom, getting to the bottom of the issue or going, the constraint is the thing that's upstream, right? And that takes time and it's uncomfortable. And, working through that, it's easier to go through the list, right? Accounting needs to do X. This isn't done. Sales hasn't done that. That's the list. But what is that upstream constraint that's driving why accounting doesn't have this done or why sales doesn't have that done? Like, that's tough discussion, right? It's easier just to go, okay, we've got that done. Accounting got that done, right? And so I think that the challenge, right? It's why we talk so much on Compound about design and deploy, right? Everyone wants to jump to deploy, mm-hmm. but we have to understand the constraints because that's the work. But if you solve it, it's worth it.
But all constraints aren't equal, right? So accounting isn't getting such and such done. Well, is that because Susie isn't doing her job well? Is that because we have bad software that our vendor has sold us? Is that some other reason? That because of the way that we get work to Susie? Is it because of the way her role is clarified? Right? Mm-hmm. Not all constraints are equal. How do you start to identify not only what the constraint is, but which ones matter the most?
Well, I think if you put it into, I'm going to call it a constraint statement, if you want to say, right? So you're going to name the function, the specific failure, and the cost.
Yeah.
Then, like last week, we talked about outcomes, the importance of outcomes, right? If you create your constraint statement with those three main areas, right, it's going to help you determine which one you're going to do first, right? Because you're going to go, okay, a failure in this area, the impact the company or the lack of outcome that's going to occur because of this constraint is huge. And if we take time to think about the impact of the failure and the cost of the failure, like that's the difference. Accounting doesn't have the thing done. Or does it say, when this doesn't happen,
such and such
occurs, and the cost of the organization is, that's a way too simplified constraint statement. But it's a different way of thinking about, because then you can figure out which ones to focus in on. Because you're like, wow, I never thought about how every time accounting doesn't do that. Sorry, we're picking on accounting today, but every time accounting doesn't do that, that the downstream effect or the we're not thinking about the upstream, right? We're saying that what that happens and how it affects the rest of the organization is pretty huge.
And this sort of comes back to what we were talking about before, which is being really clear on outcomes, right? So when you're taking an outcome-driven approach to your work, then it also becomes easier to quantify the cost, because I think one can interpret that cost is always financial, and in some level it kind of is. But in many cases, most of us aren't accountants. Sorry, accountants. So we don't know what a thing costs, but I do know the pain that I feel. Right. And that pain might be in terms of time, might be in terms of frustration. It might be in terms of actual dollars. It's really going to vary. But when there is pain, there's generally a nerve that's being pressed. And that nerve being pressed lets us know, hey, like we should pay attention to that. I say as a guy who doesn't go to the doctor when I should. But that's ultimately how this is supposed to work.
Right.
And then being clear on the outcomes helps us to identify, okay, this is where we'd like to go. We're struggling to get there for these particular reasons. We're experiencing it in the cost in terms of pain, time, dollars, whatever it is. Having the discipline to dive down and say, well, what is that? How do we get past the uncomfortable conversation? Or how do we create a framework so it doesn't feel so personal when we're trying to move down that ladder? And at the same time, how do we help the occasionally visionary ADHD leader kind of keep a muzzle on it so that the rest of the team can figure it out?
Right. Well, I think one thing that when you're starting to think about constraints, one of the things that like I tend to try to use in the back of my mind, right, is just symptoms. What's a symptom versus a constraint?
Okay.
Symptoms are visible. Constraints are structural.
Oh, I like that.
So if we think about that, and to your point about let's be sure everybody can speak, right? Structural takes a lot more teamwork, because if it's a structural issue, it's got nodes across different parts of the organization.
Yeah.
Right. But symptoms are visible. Everybody always sees the symptom. Like symptoms are easy to identify. That's the list. Right? The symptoms are the list. The constraint is the structural side of how are we going to make it so this doesn't happen again, which is a good basis of why we've put Compound together, right? Is being
symptoms
sure.
are visible, constraints are structural. I love this. Can you give me an example?
Let's go back to accounting. Might as well. Poor accounting today. So the symptom is, accounting didn't get the thing done, right? That's the symptom. We know every Friday accounting doesn't submit this thing, right? If we think about the structural side of that, it's exactly what you just said. Maybe we're not feeding Susie the information in the right time. Maybe we're not getting it there on time. Maybe we're not giving the information that's needed. Maybe we're giving such fragmented pieces of information to Susie that it takes her an extra day to get this thing done, right? That's the structural side of it. I can guarantee you, Susie and everybody, for the most part, everybody in the world doesn't show up at work every day going, man, I'm going to just do really bad work today. I just showed up today and my goal is to not get the things done I'm supposed to get done.
Yeah.
That's just not human nature.
Right.
So it's those structural things that get in our way that say, I know I'm supposed to have this done on Thursday, but we've all been there. They didn't give me this. I don't have that. I need this piece of information. I need, those are structural things that we as humans tend to just hop over because we're in get her done mode, right?
Yes.
We've got to get her done. I have to get this thing in on Thursday. And then when you get the thing in, what do? You go, oh gosh, I don't have to do this again until next Thursday. And so you still don't take time on the structural because the symptom is what you're feeling.
So we just went through this past week. In fact, one of the things Marina and I were talking about was on our issues list, and it kept showing up on our issues list for weeks at a time. Every time we thought we solved it, it would show back up, which I think is also a good marker.
Yes.
That there is probably a structural constraint somewhere to pay attention to. But in this particular case, one of the things that Marina is responsible for is status updates, and she has to know what's going on. She's running all of the operations, so she has to know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that is her biggest pet peeve is our development team hasn't been very good historically at updating the notes in the system that allow her to know what's going on. So she's chasing work.
Yes.
Right. And depending on the project, that can have sort of downstream consequences, especially if we're on a tight budget and things are moving very quickly. Things we do are complex.
Mm-hmm.
And so this kept circling up in the issues on our L10s was I need better documentation. I need notes. And the temptation was to almost finger wag at the development team, right?
That,
Why aren't you guys doing this job this way, right? But when we took this step back and we started to unpack it, well, turns out that developers are working in this system over here. Let's call it 8 hours a day. But the notes happen in this system over here, which they don't really ever have to touch except for administratively, because that's not where their work environment lives. Their work environment isn't in our ERP. Their work environment is in our code base. And so they're working in this area. Marina's working in this area. And so she's getting frustrated. Why isn't this information over here? So the symptom is like, hey, you guys need to do a better job of logging information from here to here. Turns out the actual constraint, though, is that they're not even in the same environment.
Yeah, right.
And so for us to say, hey, you need to stop your workflow and go and do a totally different workflow.
Yes.
For this administrative purpose kind of seems unreasonable. But it's also how we tend to think about most problems. In this particular case, we ultimately ended up building a bridge so that they can work over here, and we automated a connection over there. But it took us weeks of that symptom resurfacing, and us finally saying, wait a minute, all the finger wagging in the world isn't solving this problem.
Right.
Maybe we're trying to put a Band-Aid on a symptom instead of actually figure out the cure to solving the problem.
Yes. Yeah. And when you did that, how does that feel?
Well, I'll let you know next week when we're done implementing. But I will say this. At the end of the conversation, it was relief.
Yes.
It was all of a sudden, it was clarity around this idea that we had identified the right thing to solve, that more finger wagging wasn't going to get it done. More notifications to go do this thing, more reminders weren't going to solve the problem because the constraint wasn't the person. And I think you probably know this better than I would. I feel like it's so often the tendency to want to name the person and the constraint together.
Yes. Yes.
And that was certainly our temptation. Even knowing all the stuff that we know, that's our temptation. Right? It's just so like you want to put the blame.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the case when we actually went a little deeper. So how do you get a little bit deeper? How do you lead a team to say, hey, it's not Santiago, it's structural? How do you start that process?
Well, I think, one of the things you asked on a question earlier was, the room, right? I think part of it is room dynamics a little bit when you're working on this stuff, because like you said, originally we want to finger wag, right? That's something that we naturally want to do. But when you're talking about like the meeting I was referencing, right, with the list, right? The list is easy because everyone feels the pain. when they say accounting doesn't have that thing done because it's a structural issue, right?
Yep.
Everybody in the room's like, you're right, because when they don't do it, everybody has their own reaction. It impacts this person here, this person there, this person there. And then you've got to be careful of, I call it the dominant personality in the room, right? Mm-hmm. So now you've got that dominant personality in the room that's going to be the person that wants to name it right away.
Yep.
And so once they name it, because everyone else couldn't name it that succinctly as that person did. Like that's that skill that person has, right? And everybody's like, yeah. And they could feel it. Mm-hmm. And so the dominant personality comes forward, names the symptom. Everybody can feel the symptom. Everybody nods. And then we stop. And so the how is to really kind of dive into, like you said, is this something that's recurring? You know, are we seeing this over and over? Why is that happening? There's a thing, anybody who's ever worked with me loves, I'm going to say hates, this exercise because it's the 5 whys.
Yes.
And so that is how do you kind of get to that? And so, if you come up with an issue, why does accounting not get that thing done? Well, why? And if you work through 5 levels of why, you'll get closer. Most of the time you'll get to the structural issue. If not, you're going to get closer and you're going to feel you're not quite there.
Yeah.
And so, just from a simple exercise standpoint of view, if you can just, well, why doesn't accounting get it? Well, because this isn't coming. Okay, why is that not coming? Because they don't have time to get that system moved over to, well, why is that, right? And then if you just keep going through that why exercise, you're going to get a lot closer. And so, again, like with clients, I'll be like, all right, we're going to do the why thing. And you can just see the room. They're like, oh, because it hurts.
Yeah. Yes.
It's painful to go through those 5 whys. Think about it just in your own life. 5 why yourself on something that's, you're working through, right? But it's hard to get through those 5 whys. And that's how you kind of dig down into it. Sometimes it takes 7. Should be 5, but you can just keep going. And when you get to that last one, and again, I've watched it in rooms and dynamics over and over again, but like just even the bodies start to relax. They're just like, oh man, and then that sense of, wow, that was worthwhile because now we've dug down to the root cause.
So it's like in my example here. So why doesn't Marina have the information she needs to make her next decision? Because the developers didn't update the notes. Well, why didn't the developers update the notes? Well, because they ran out of time. Well, why did they run out of time? Well, because they're working over here, and at the end of the day, in order for them to go over here, they have to do this other thing. Why do they have to do this other thing?
Right.
Well, because this is where we track this and where we track that. But why? Well, it turns out to be purely just for information purposes, right? And as you start to go down one thing over, like that ends up being the root. And in this particular case, we got there pretty quickly. I think it might have been 4 whys. Mm-hmm. Like, why isn't this happening? Well, it's not because they don't want to do it. Right. They know. And in fact, I think from a management standpoint, I love what you said earlier. People don't come to work wanting to do a bad job. If anything, when you start to finger wagging, people kind of just they start to shut down a little bit. Mm-hmm. They start to feel ashamed.
Right. It's your problem. You deal with it.
Like, right? I'm thinking about this meeting we had, and the developers were like, I'm sorry, I'll do a better job. I'm sorry, I'll do a better job. But we both know, like, one, you're taking on like an unnecessary level of guilt, and I'll do a better job. Like it's good relationship repair. Mm-hmm. It's not really concrete.
Right.
What does do a better job?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah. What does that mean? What does that look like? Explain to me specifically how I'm going to see a better job be done.
Right. And in this case I remember the developer saying, well, I'll go over here at the end of the day. And that was, for me, that was part of that moment where I was like, wait a minute. Why do you have to go over here? Why aren't you already there? He's like, oh, well, because I do my job this way over here. Oh, I didn't realize that. Mm-hmm. So you're over here doing this thing. We're over here doing this thing. So this isn't just a administrative burden. We're actually asking you to stop,
right?
Transition, log into this other thing, summarize everything you've just spent hours over here doing, and now pop it over here for my reporting.
Right.
So is there a way that we can both get what we want? Like, I need the reporting.
Right.
You need to do the job. Is there a way for us to kind of come together? But I think you're right that exercise, I don't know if, I don't want to call it painful. I would call it tedious.
Mm-hmm. Well, it takes time.
It does take time, and it can feel tedious.
Yes.
And you have to cut through that first emotional layer of, first of all, Marina being annoyed and finger wagging.
Right.
Santiago feeling ashamed and being like, I'm sorry, Mom, I'll do better. Right. Like, you have to get past that first layer.
Right.
But once you start doing, you can get to the structural. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's when you can start to solve problems.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So there are a lot of ways that you can identify constraints. One of the ways that we did it in this particular case is this conversation keeps coming up, never gets resolved. Mm-hmm. That's one way to identify what's broken or what's slow or what's ultimately causing a constraint. What are other ways that people can try to figure out, like, what's actually broken, what's actually slow? What are other ways we can identify constraints? Is that the only way?
No, I mean, that's one of the things within the compound framework. Like, when we look at the signal, yes, part of that is a Y component, if you want to say, but we've built in other mechanisms to help drive into what that looks like. And so, that's one of the things I think we've had plenty of these conversations. So for anybody listening in, like, this is like, we've had plenty of conversations that's gotten us to this point. But, building that framework around those 5 whys, it's an instrument, but there's other things to deconstruct that work. Because when we try to apply tools to symptoms, it doesn't work. It's why everybody's putting AI on top of, let's just put this thing on top of, let's deploy. Let's not design. And so, I think all of those things together, it's like, you've got to spend that time. And that's why we're so excited about, from a compound standpoint of view, is, yes, there is a method to that madness, and we can help you go through that. So
in that spirit, one of the things that we've put together is
how about that for a lead-in? I didn't even know it.
That's designed to help you find the constraint, not the symptom. And this is a pretty straightforward, maybe 3 or 4 page exercise that helps you walk through this kind of step by step. And one of the things that we talk about on here is some ways to try and identify constraints. So I mentioned, in our case, the conversation keeps coming up but never seems to get resolved. Another is, where are there workarounds? Mm-hmm. So where are areas where manual processes exist because something failed, or people are duct taping solutions?
Right.
Another one is, no one ever wants to know exactly how the sausage is made, but there's sometimes where you really don't want people to know how the sausage is made. So what processes would you not let a customer or a stakeholder, or maybe your boss, watch, right? Like, that might be an area where a constraint could surface. Where do you keep losing the same person, or where is there a lot of turnover? You would know this better than I would, but it seems like in areas where constraints abound, people bounce.
Yes.
Would you say that that's true?
Yeah, absolutely. It's turnover. I mean, think about it. If you want to do a fast mental constraint process in your head, think about the role that turns over the most in your organization.
Yeah. And why is that?
Why? Right.
Draw that correlation for me.
Because when it's frustration, right? I mean, it's the person who can never get their work done on time because of the structural system that's built for them. So, there's a Dale Carnegie phrase I love. It's like, give your dog a good name, right? Like, so if you don't give the dog a good name, he doesn't have anything good to stand up to. Right.
Oh,
so,
interesting.
if the dog's name is Meathead, like, right here, Meathead, come on, Meathead, you're a good boy, Meathead. Like, you're always just calling the dog a bad name. Right. And so you got to give the dog a good name. But in this role example, the reason people are turning over on that is you gave them a bum job to get done. And so they're never able to be successful. And again, who wants to go to work every single day going home going, man, I didn't do it again. I didn't do it again.
I failed.
It must be me. I'm bad. No, there's a structural problem that we don't want to take the time. I mean, time is a constraint, and in just the day, right? We don't have time to do that right now. Yeah. Well, no, you kind of do. But that role that's turning over a lot, there's a reason why, it's going to be the word of the day, there's a reason why that role is turning over a lot. And it's because of the way the role is constructed. That is just not setting the dog up with a good name. And so that's an easy way in your mind. If you go, oh, I have this one role, it's always, this is the hardest role to fill because it's always turning over. Stop. Why?
Right.
Why? Right?
So I think these are 4 ways that you can just start looking. Where are there workarounds? Where are you dusting it under the rug? What don't you want people to see? Where is there a lot of turnover? And what things keep coming up but never getting resolved? One of the things we also talk about is the is not test. Mm-hmm. Can you explain what this is and how it works? Because when you shared this with me, it took me a minute to understand kind of how it works. So walk me through the is not test. What is this? How does it work? So the idea here, right, is that where do things happen? Where don't they happen? And
okay. I'm like, which one? Okay, which conversation was that? I know. That's why I was like, Jesse, I need one more clue.
we have too many tools, right? So this idea of things happen in some parts of an organization, but they run smoothly in other parts of an organization. And so one of the things, or one of the ways you can start to identify a constraint or solving it, at least as I understand it, is where are we successful? Right. Where aren't we successful? Mm-hmm. What's the difference?
Yeah.
Right. At the most basic level, what's the difference?
Right.
Why is this supervisor's accounting always on time, but that one's not? I don't know if that's ever been part of your experience.
Oh, yes.
But I find this even with larger companies, you might have 2 different managers or 2 different supervisors running same departments, and they get different outcomes. Well, why is that?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's another good way to, again, help constraint identification, right? If you've got an is not happening, there's a reason behind that. And again, you're probably looking at the symptom.
Yep.
And so, when you can see that, the old, was it Sesame Street? One of these things is not like the other, right? The song just came into my head. But I mean, when you see those things, there's something there that's causing that. And when we think about AI deployment, we talked about why AI adoption is, flat. AI adoption can sometimes be flat, right? And so that goes back to that design deploy. And that flat component of it is one of those, I'm going to say, symptoms as well of the is not. We can't put AI on top of a symptom and expect it to work, which in my belief is what we're doing right now.
By and large, yes.
Right, with AI, which is why we're seeing the statistics that we're seeing on why we're not having the success rates with AI and that frustration, right? We go back to, I just had a lunch yesterday and we were talking about at lunch how everybody has to do something.
Yes.
We all have to do something with AI now. I'm like, well, what are you doing with AI? She goes, well, everybody has to be doing something.
I'm using Claude.
Right. And that's usually what people say.
Yeah.
Like they say, I love it when they go, I have a chat GPT.
Right.
Or whatever. So that is what the answer. And I love asking that question. Anytime I talk to anybody, that's like one of the questions. So, what are you doing with AI? It's always, I have a chat GPT or I have a Claude or, like that. Like that's not AI deployment. I'm putting a tool on top of my systems. And I never took the time to identify the constraint. And as you and I know, that's where AI shines.
Yes.
Right? You put AI with a constraint, wow.
Yes.
That's the difference maker. And
so
organizations want to get there.
What's so powerful about that is you kind of get a double, right? Because one, AI can not only help you identify the constraint in many cases, there's tools that we can provide for that. It can also help you design around the constraint. And in many cases, it can then eliminate the constraint through a hybrid workforce or even entirely synthetic workforce, which when we get to those, that's going to blow people's minds.
Oh, yeah.
When we start talking about
I can't wait to talk about that. Yeah.
Because that's when you start to say, man, holy moly, I didn't even know this was even possible. In fact, yesterday, Harley and I were going through some marketing things together, and I was like, okay, Harley, we're gonna take a little bit of a gamble with you here today, because we're using tools and we definitely drink our own Kool-Aid, but I wanted to push it a little bit. And so I said, part of the reason that I'm so effective at using AI in my team is because we live in Claude Code, which gives us a whole lot of other capabilities. It's more like it's like if regular Claude, we talk about design before deploy, right? If regular Claude is like a 25 bucket Lego bucket, Claude Code is like the 1,000 Lego bucket.
Yes.
You just get so much more.
Yes.
But it can be intimidating because a lot of people hear the word code and they're like, I'm not coding.
I'm not a coder. Right. Yeah.
Even though if you're, Claude Cowork actually came out of Claude Code because at Anthropic's headquarters, people who weren't developers were using Claude Code for non-development tasks and getting massive returns. Right. So they built Cowork to try and make it easier for what we call muggles affectionately. Yeah. Right? So I said, Harley, let's take a gamble. Let's just see what happens if we were to put Claude Code on your computer and if we could start to, because we had some constraints. We were trying to get more content published, but we've got all these different buckets, yada, yada, yada. We won't bore people with all the details, but we knew the constraint. The constraint was our output, wasn't what we needed it to be, and we wanted to move it in that direction. Well, there are a lot of reasons why that was the symptom. There's a lot of reasons why that was happening. One, it takes a long time to put together good content, right? You have to do video editing, you have to do copywriting. Each one of those themselves takes a lot of time. Right. Well, then there's the level of experience that Harley may or may not have. She's really good in these ways, but doesn't know anything about these things. So there's all of these things that you start to unpack where we said, okay, ultimately the bottleneck here is that we have information experience gaps, and we've also got this throughput problem we're trying to solve at the same time. So I said, let's just try that. Yeah. Let's just try and see if we can get Claude Code installed on your computer, and what that would look like. An hour and a half later, we had 3 agents running in parallel, just doing different things, right? We got a whole foundation organized. And so when you start to get down this path where you start to identify your constraint and you move towards design, again, we'll get to later, you realize that these agents can be really, really, really powerful once you've given them the problem to solve in a really, really clear way. Right. And that's we've talked about probably almost every session now, clarity. Yes. Clarity. Like we have to have that clear task for the agent to perform, right? And that's such a key. That's why constraints are so important, because we've got to understand what we're trying to solve. And that constraint statement. Yep. So let's talk about the constraint statement next, because I think that's exactly right. Yeah. So what is the constraint statement? How do we approach it? So the constraint statement, I mean, let's again try to lay it out in an easy way, right? Function cannot, whatever the desired outcome is. So function cannot desired outcome because root cause, which costs us approximately dollar amount per time frame. Give me an example. Can you make one up? Let's pick on our accountants again. Okay, so our accountant, let me think, function. Our accountant cannot resolve quarter end in under 8 hours because the resolution requires accessing multiple systems. Like that was like your example, right? Yep. And I mean, very common. They're not integrated, and it's costing us 20 grand per month in labor and 20 grand per month in organizational delays. I don't know. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, they're not easy. I mean, I think that I was like, I'm going to kind of like chunk through this, but it's okay because when you're trying to name a constraint, you do have to think at a much different level. But if you use that general framework, function cannot desired outcome because root cause, which costs us approximately X over Y amount of time. Yeah. That like sounds like an easy thing, right? That's easy. I could do that. It takes time. You have to kind of think through it. Well, I go back to your comment about lack of clarity creates drama, right? And this is the work that the leadership teams need to be doing
Right.
in order to even think about AI. And you'll notice, like, we talk about AI, but we haven't talked about AI.
Right.
Everything we've talked about so far is about how you even just create the foundations, the conditions where you can do something like this successfully. But if you're not clear
Right.
on what you're trying to solve, and I'll say this as the technology person who is often tasked with building a thing somebody wants to build.
Right.
If the build spec isn't clear and the problem space isn't clear, you will spend a lot of money doing the wrong thing, and nobody likes that.
Right. Right.
So I think what you described, can you go through it one more time? What are the elements of the constraint statement?
So function,
Yep.
cannot,
Yep.
desired outcome,
Yep.
because,
Yep.
root cause,
Yep.
which costs us approximately X over Y time period.
Who contributes to the writing of that statement? Is that something that a line manager sits down and does themselves? Is that something that a management team sits down? Is it all of the above? Who writes that statement?
I don't know if it's as important to say who writes it, but who approves it, if you want to say, is important, right? Like, you could do that as, I mean, it's a simple sentence, right? Go ahead and try to do it, like, real quick. But it's not necessarily the who. I think it's a team decision to approve it. Like, if you're sitting there, you're the accountant and you're having that problem, right? You can write that constraint statement and take it to your team and say, help me with this, right? Is this what you're feeling? Let's go through the whys, right? Like, but it's got to have the group that's involved, the function that's involved, or the organization, because one function is just a cosmic group of a bunch of other functions, right? All pulled together. But you've got to have agreement on that so that we're solving for the right thing. But,
as I'm listening to you, I'm actually even thinking, I wonder if this is the kind of thing that you should be teaching your team how to do, so that individuals can come up to you when they hit their own constraints. And, I've been in many meetings, as if you have, where you're looking at an accountability or a scorecard and you're like, well, why isn't such and such done? And then there's a lot of hemming and hawing. I'm wondering if there is a value in teaching your team how to write these statements, one, so they can get clear in their own roles about how their work gets done and the obstacles to getting it done. But also, it becomes a really, really clear way to communicate upstream. I don't know what's right. Managing up. It never occurred to me. When you say managing up, what are you managing up? Is it up a hierarchy? I don't know. Whatever. You get the idea.
You're managing up all the time.
Yes. So being able to equip your team members with this, so that way they can also be a lot clearer. Would save, as a management team, save you a lot of time trying to understand what the actual issue is. So I know I keep hammering it, but one more time, because I think this is such an important thing for people to learn.
Function cannot.
Yep.
Desired outcome, because root cause, which costs us approximately X dollar amount per Y time period. Sorry about that.
Function cannot.
That I was like, why can't I think of the word cannot? Yeah. Function cannot.
Yep.
Desired outcome.
Yep. Because.
Root cause. Which costs us approximately X.
Costs X.
Per Y time.
Why the per Y? Just because we want to look at the units.
We want to look at the units. Right.
Got it. Love it. Function cannot. Desired outcome. Because root cause, which costs X per Y.
Yes.
So we have it. We'll print it and make it available.
Yeah, that's very
make
important.
it available for download.
Well, and I want to go back to the point I was thinking about when you were talking about, is it worth teaching the organization? And, I worked for Herman Miller for a period of time. And Herman Miller is very much like a Toyota kind of, operating system, if you want to say.
Yep.
And one of the things that was very effective there is we all were taught, it didn't matter what function. I'm in HR, right? Why does HR need to know how to write an A3? I don't know if you've heard of
A3.
A3 is a problem-solving diagnostic.
Okay.
And it's a hand-drawn thing with like stick figures. And, I mean, it's actually kind of a interesting process, because I remember when I sat down in A3 training class and I'm drawing stick figures on a piece of paper, like the first thing I'm like, I can't draw. So this is going to be just absolutely terrible. But every single person knew how to solve or write, not solve, knew how to write an A3.
And what does that do for the organization? Why was that?
It's again, problem identification, right? And so you would kind of like lay it out before you would get into your meeting. So when you were coming to a meeting, everybody would pull out their A3 or whatever. But the only reason I give that as an example is because it was a cultural way. Now that when you're in the middle of it, you're like, why am I doing this thing? And then you're like, oh, this actually works, right? But what it did was it changed the mindset for the culture. And so, when we go back to, the statement of the constraint statement and being sure that we're thinking about things in that way, I think it is very important to be sure that you cascade that all the way from the top down so that people are thinking about how they're doing their work in that way. Because at the end of the day, a lot of this is mindset shift, right?
Yes.
It's shifting our mindset to saying, we want to solve problems. We want to solve constraints. We don't want to just solve symptoms, because most organizations are solving symptom after symptom after symptom after symptom. And when they feel a symptom, then their next reaction is let's call Jesse, let's put in AI because that'll fix it.
Whack-a-mole.
Exactly.
That's kind of what it feels like sometimes.
Exactly. So, it was just one of those interesting things because everybody did learn it. And so I do think that it's a cultural shift.
Yes.
Once an organization understands the compound framework and starts living the compound framework, and again, things just start, going at a more efficient rate in a more efficient manner, then yes, that's a cultural shift. So having people understand the statement and memorizing it, like I obviously couldn't remember it there for a minute, but like that is very important because that's the way they're going to start thinking. It's the way they're going to start addressing their work. It's the way when they're thinking, they get to the point to think about AI integration and deploying and design. They're going to think design versus deploy. And hopefully if we can get mindset shifts like that, cultural shifts in essence, right? Then we're going to start seeing a much more efficient and successful rate of AI. And as we said on our first session, you're going to start seeing it in the P&L.
100%.
You should be seeing it in the P&L. If you're not seeing your AI in your P&L, there's a constraint that you haven't identified.
Yeah, and I think, Julie, what I love about what you're saying is because there are so many snake oil salesmen and women, snake people, whatever, that are out there hawking AI, whereas it almost feels like this should be something you can just drop in. And the conversations that we're having really are about creating the foundation for a successful adoption.
Yes.
Right. I think there's so much, what you're saying earlier, we got to do something, There's so much pressure to do something, anything, that you're more likely to have a lot of false starts and frustration and wasted capital if you aren't doing this work up front.
Right.
To get really, really clear on your constraints, making the distinctions between tasks and outcomes, and putting in the work to figure out where are we at the foundational level of our business, how are we actually operating, how do we prepare our company, our organization to receive this technology, because it doesn't just happen by accident.
Right.
Julie, this is awesome. I love our conversations. I love sitting down and having them with you. One more time before we let everybody go, like our constraint statement one more time. So function cannot desired outcome because root cause, which costs us approximately X dollars and Y in time. Awesome. Julie, always a pleasure. I'm super grateful for this time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This is always so great. Just us sitting down and talking. You can imagine everybody, like we have these chats all the time and it's just such a joy to be able to share those with everybody else. So anyway, glad everybody's here. And until we talk again next week, let's stop transforming and let's start compounding.